and the expectations arising. And we wanted to look at the regulatory information requirements as an important information requirement that isn't covered by contract. Any of you who've looked at ISO 19650 see that it gives a framework for the setting up of information requirements within a contract and their discussion, approval, adjustment as part of the normal contract process. The regulatory information requirements are different. So just going to run through, pardon me, some details of the scope and objectives, and then we'll talk about the work that we're bringing to a conclusion. And yeah, we'll be looking at spreadsheets, but we'll also be looking at the BSDD and the IDS as part of the solution. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Tomi, who will talk about some of the challenges and some of the decisions we've had to make and some of the decisions we haven't quite managed to finalize yet. And then, you know, we hope we can have a discussion. Okay. This is... Okay, so yes, little bit of history. First of all, we must express our appreciation to the Finnish government and to the Scottish government, who both funded the work and really allowed Tomi and I the time to explore the issues. And of course, we must thank the people who supported the project in kind, with ideas, comments, data, examples. Finland, Estonia, Singapore, Dubai, Scotland, and England and Wales, where we picked up on a project called DCOM that had just finished when we started. Like the guidance for regulators, we want to do a pre-release of the content. And so, again, if you're interested in commenting on the content and being part of our review panel, the email address will come up at the end, but you can guess what it is. Okay, so we wanted to identify the existing capability, what's already in the IFC schema, and how can we fill in some gaps. The IFC schema consists of the data schema and the property sets and the recommended property sets. And of course, we can have informal property sets. So the aim was to showcase what we can do already. Of course, we're on the lookout for any improvements that need to be made. And most importantly, we wanted to take an international view. We're very well aware that the regulatory regimes differ from country to country. And Tomi will speak enthusiastically about the importance of documenting the number of saunas in buildings. And I have to admit that in Scotland there aren't many, and so on. So there are these local differences. And we're not trying to smooth over those, but they're not the subject for an international contribution. What we do want to do is to make sure that there is scope for local improvement. We've got this growing interest in open BIM standards. We've mentioned already, but Dubai and Estonia and Finland and Singapore are already committed to implementations this year or next. So we wanted to build on that experience and offer it to the international community. I think, yeah, there was limited coverage, and we'll come to the exact figures, but there's limited coverage of regulatory information in IFC 2x3 and IFC 4. Though, of course, a lot of the information that is there is relevant. We're also aware that there's a history of fairly poor quality BIM models, and the idea of regulatory submissions is an incentive to improve the quality of the models, and vice versa, I think. And as models get better, it will be easier to meet the regulatory requirements. So we're perfectly aware that this is a ladder that people have to climb. And of course, when we come to talking about the issues, one of the things that we have to tackle is the poor understanding of the IFC, and Franco's guidance for regulators will make a difference. We think that by explaining what the IFC can do for regulators will also help. Here's that diagram again. I think the regulator is a consumer of information, and there is no contract, there's no negotiation, and so regulatory information requirements have to be well defined, so that people can achieve compliance. Of course, elsewhere in the summits over the last year or so, we've talked about IDS as being a tool for enforcing information requirements, and I think that will be important too. One remark about the financial case. A few years ago, the regulatory room, as it was then, asked a professor at Toronto University, Professor El Dirabi, to look at the finance case for automatic code checking. And being a good academic, he came back and challenged the question. And he came back and said that the regulatory system is a social network, and as he called it, a social value network that really says that everyone in the process has to have gains if we're going to move towards automated or even supported, digitally supported regulatory approval processes. Interestingly, someone sent me this link recently, which is actually saying that automated checking is a really important weapon or tool for governments, because the drag of compliance checking actually makes the economy harder to manage. Most government, or many governments, use the construction sector to boost demand, to inject money, to get infrastructure results, of course, or to slow it down, depending on what's happening in the economy. And actually, the planning and building permit systems is something that actually makes those levers very soft and not as effective as they should be. But faster compliance checking generates better economic, environmental, and social outcomes. So there is a big case for going down this route. The other thing is that this diagram was made by Masako Muto for the regulatory room possibly 10 years ago. And it said that we will have this, we need to develop a stepwise approach. And I think, you know, for many jurisdictions, that's still likely to be the right approach. That looking at the manual or paper-based or PDF-based process, there is the opportunity to accept open BIM models as supporting material to help explain the scheme to the regulators. There's an opportunity for those regulators to use the model to explore and make measurements, no doubt, and look for areas of concern alongside the paper submission. And then there's the opportunity to go for fully automated compliance checking. I have to say that model is looking a bit dodgy now, because Dubai has gone straight to automatic code compliance checking. Finland is going straight to it. Estonia is going straight to the final stage, and so on. So I think maybe it'll be a mixture of what kind of paths people will take. towards automated compliance checking. So yes, we always envisaged we'd be following the turquoise line of stepwise implementation, using OpenBIM to support regulators in more and more interesting ways before we get to ACC, automatic compliance checking. What seems to be happening is the dark blue line, where people are doing a lot of thought and then going straight to automatic compliance checking. So we'll see. We have also used this diagram a lot. It's really saying that there are many approval processes. They get called different things in different countries, even when even when translated into English. So we try and talk about concept approval, which may have to do with land use regulation. It may have to do with the overall building dimensions. We talk about technical approval when the details of the facility are examined. There may be approvals during construction, and then there may be approvals or permission to occupy or use the facility going on from there. Now, each of them can be supported by OpenBIM. A lot of our focus has been on the technical approvals, and also aware that in many countries you can join together the concept approval and the technical approval. Yeah, we're trying to keep our eye on all of these, but I guess technical approval has been our focus. So the aim of the project, to support the common means of identifying the entities of interest in regulatory compliance. Yes, we're particularly looking at buildings. Infrastructure is a separate set of questions that we can talk about a different day. We want to identify the properties common across multiple jurisdictions. As I say, the number of saunas is not in our scope because it's not every country that's likely to be interested in such things. But if there's a commonality between the examples we looked at, then we put it in. And then we want to exploit the medium that we have to get this information out there. We will be putting the use case descriptions of the use cases we're addressing on the use case management tool. There's already one for concept approval. If we need to, we will make comments on the IFC schema development. We will certainly be using the buildingSMART data dictionary to hold the content we generate. And I think, in many ways, the most exciting thing is the introduction of IDS, so that we can actually check the tools. We can use tools to actually check the quality of information deliverables. Very quickly, if you haven't been to the use case management tool, find it, browse it. It is authored by lots of different countries, different languages, different domains, but it's an opportunity for people to record what they think the use case, examples of use cases for OpenBIM, and some of them go down to quite considerable detail. The data dictionary is an online repository. It's freely open to use and access, and almost any organization or team, or in our case, the regulatory domain, can put content there. And it's then accessible for browsing, but also through APIs to actually control applications. And the IDS can reference the BSDD and say, we want this property. If you want to know more about it, here is all the information you need. And lastly, the IDS is starting to make the question of level of information need computable. It focuses on the attributes, the properties, a little bit about the relationships, And of course, about what objects should be present in the model, and it's checkable automatically. And that's pretty exciting because at last, clash detection isn't the only thing we can use BIM models for. We can actually check the quality of the contents. Okay. So, faced with multiple jurisdictions, we needed to focus our attention a little bit. And this bar chart of the areas that are subject to building regulation summarize, this is for Europe, I should say, the CEBC. They listed the things that are regulated. And we considered mechanical resistance, structural integrity, and so on. And I thought that's a very specialist domain. And we just didn't have the competence to go to that. They also considered architectural quality as a common thing, but we don't want to start judging that, do we? But also territorial planning and third-party interests, like neighbors, like infrastructure providers, water, sewage, power, and so on. But we focused on the three that I boxed: safety in the case of fire, safety and accessibility of buildings, and energy efficiency. These are the most common and the ones where we felt that the open BIM could have the strongest role. And we took in lots of suggestions and advice. Get to the statistics in a moment, but in summary, we took in about 4,000 suggestions for properties. The bulk of those came from England and from Scotland, because that was the result of a very detailed review. Luckily for us, Estonia and Singapore and Finland had already done the filtering of their requirements, and so they supplied much shorter lists, but much better in many ways. And then we had to filter it. And of course, as I've mentioned, we wanted to filter out those that were really specific to particular jurisdictions or particular processes that are built into the regulations, which are not really the subject for open BIM. A common area is cross-referencing in regulations. Are you compliant to clause 25 will say, are you compliant to clause 22? Or are you compliant to this European standard? Or are you? And we just took all of those out and said, that's a separate kind of questions that we don't need to put into our list of properties. And then we got to the really interesting area, which is it deducible or calculable from the geometry and relationships that are in the IFC models anyway? And a large number came under that category, that the regulations want totals, total number of bathrooms, total number of stories, total number of people, and actually the individual bits of information will be in the model somewhere. So totals and net clearances, the shape and extent of things, and in some cases relationships such as adjacencies. And then the last question we had to answer was, is it already in IFC 4.3? If a suggestion made it through all those 5 checks, then it's a candidate to be in the regulatory information requirements. Similarly with object types, which Tomi will probably talk about in a moment. So what did we do? Well, I'm afraid I'm going to give you some statistical summaries. And I have to stand back just to check it. Yeah. Actually, let me come over here so I can just read it, because it is very, very small. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yes, so for each country that contributed to the project, we identified those that we felt were specific to that jurisdiction. The summary from relationships summarizes something where we think that looking at the IFC model, those things can be worked out. And then there are one or two others. Diagrams, of course, are very common in regulations. And we had to put those to one side. Question, do you comply with diagram 15? Is not something that OpenBIM can answer yet. So looking at the totals, we whittled down that down to about 201 properties that really make the basis of the regulatory information requirements. But we also found that already in the IFC were 356. So a lot of it is already there. And really what we're doing is just rounding things out to make sure that it's available to all. And the other number that I've highlighted there, 172 in the different jurisdictions, which are deducible from relationships. So a substantial part of maybe even half of the things that we were being asked to answer are now going to be covered pretty directly. So, and what does the outcome look like? Well, I can't show it all yet, but the kinds of things that we produced are a list by object type, by the reason that it's being asked for. Is it fire, or is it access, or is it energy, or identification sort of as a general category? Does it need a special predefined type? And then we get a name and a description and a suggested group, and we're using the name pset_window regulatory for as many things as we can there. So 201, you've got about 8 or 10 there. We've got 201 of these, and we think that they will meet the need of a lot of regulatory environments. So these are yes, I don't need to repeat the 4 categories. Identification is a bit of a catch-all for naming, predefined and user-defined types, classification and measurement, which is it's a universal requirement. One way or another, you have to know what the size of things are and what their classification or what their user-defined types are. When it came to fire, we're interested in fire regulation. And I should say that in the building domain, there's a group looking at fire simulation, which is almost a completely separate topic. And similarly, with accessibility and with energy, what we're trying to cover is how things are regulated, not necessarily how things are simulated, and so on. Okay, that's the scope. Now I'm going to hand over to Tomi, who's going to take us through some of the challenges we faced in trying to do this.
First of all, I will go maybe back a couple. As you can see, one of the things which Nick didn't mention is that, as you can see, we are using pset_. And if you have done your homework, you know that that's kind of the pset_ property name or property set name is reserved for standard IFC properties. So what we are aiming here is not just kind of additional things. We are actually aiming to include these into the IFC standard, hopefully at some point. So that's kind of the goal, at least. And the same can be said also for the predefined types. probably don't have any figures for those, but today we have give and take, we have almost the same number of new predefined types as we have new properties. And there's maybe some of those who were in Rome, I guess, where I presented this, the idea how you understand how IFC works. We have the IFC entity, then we have the predefined type. They are kind of the class and the subclass. And since we are not going to, in this project, we are not actually proposing any new IFC entities, we have utilized predefined types. So that we don't, we are not going to change the IFC schema, but with the predefined types, we can add more kind of intelligence to the entities. If you ask me, I would make IFC, I would make the predefined type as a mandatory attribute. At the moment, in IFC, that is just optional. But maybe you have already guessed, in Finland, it's mandatory. So, we require that the predefined type is specified to all entities. If it exists, because there are a couple of entities where you don't have a predefined type yet. Challenges. One thing that the challenge is from as Nick already mentioned, that they are kind of the jurisdictions, and even in one country you could have several different jurisdictions which have a little bit different approach to the information, and they are many cases rather independent. We have here in Finland typically the big cities they have more resources, they have produced a lot of guidance, they have produced also their local more precise like requirements for the permits and the documentation, whereas the smaller communities, municipalities, they are more relaxed and more flexible with those. So it's kind of the different jurisdictions. And of course, like Nick said, also that we have these different kind of like the famous example number of saunas. It's not really used anywhere else that in Nordic countries, but maybe that'd be a good idea to have it also elsewhere. But that has been also kind of in our project to try to understand, as Nick explained, that we have collected the properties and also predefined types from different countries, different jurisdictions. So to understand that what is the actual thing that it's aimed at, what is Singapore doing with this property or this predefined type, and that kind of try to generalize that into an international level so it can be implemented to international standard such as IFC. Language differ. That's another. We have different the same for the same kind of concept or same thing. We have different words. Some use American English, some use British English, some use local English. So that's also how can we harmonize, and for some reason we have now picked the British English as our bottom line. So try to bear with us with that. So, but for example, looking at the predefined types from Singapore, there is refuse, which is for waste. Now, I have translated those all waste and so on. But that's kind of that to try to understand what is actually the original meaning. And then, of course, that same goes to terminology in general. but yeah, but those were kind of the things that what we have been looking at, and like it says in the last row, we are not trying to standardize the regulations. We are actually just trying to standardize the technical platform where you can present not the regulations, but the answer to the regulations, because IFC is kind of the represents. It's not a place to represent regulations. Regulations are different, but this is kind of that. How can we then answer with the design to the regulations, and trying to find those things in here. So. Like I said, we haven't added any new classes. I mean, IFC entities into the schema. We have on our list roughly 180 around new predefined types, roughly 200 properties, and of course we are open to. That's why we are now at this stage, even though we are not ready yet, we are opening kind of that those of you who are interested to comment or participate, then you can kind of we can share the data or these lists with you. So then you can comment, and maybe hopefully we can exclude something, but also I'm happy to also include some new things if they are really needed, because there is lots of space in IFC. I don't have any. there is no limit. Have anything? Yeah. The subtypes. I really think that the predefined types, which is kind of the subtype of these guys, this is the key element or the key thing. And like I said, if I could decide, that would be made mandatory, because that's really a nice way to extend, and it's also a way to clarify what you really mean. And even in those cases where you have like IFC door and the predefined type is door, I would still make it mandatory so that we know that, okay, this IFC class, which name is IFC door, really means a door, because with the same IFC class, you can also present the gate or boom barrier or a trapdoor. So there's kind of several different entities inside that one class, and they may be quite different in their purpose. The common thing for all of those should be to kind of that they should be geometrically at least similar. And this has been part of the work to find from the IFC structure that if we need to add a new entity, kind of a predefined type, to find the closest match from the class hierarchy. That what would be the closest match, and put that predefined type under the correct class. So basically, at the moment, of course, you can also use user-defined types, but that's not inside our project. That's your local approach then, and so that's kind of excluded. Then classification is another question that comes up every now and then. That how does IFC relate to classification? Because there are a couple of quite strong classification systems. UK is using Uniclass, and US is using Omega. So they're quite strong position. But in my eyes, classification system is always purpose driven. I've been trying to explain the kind of the relation between classification system or systems and IFC in a way that classification system sets out a question. Load-bearing internal walls. That's one class in classification system. To present that in IFC, you actually need to know that, okay, it's IFC door, which predefined type, IFC wall, which predefined type is partition, which property pset wall common is external, is false, and load bearing is true. So you need several things, but the thing is that you can find, if you know the answer, so the classification puts out the question. If you know the question, then you can find out the answer from IFC. But the same entity in IFC, or the same combination, this IFC wall with predefined type with the properties, answers to several questions set by the classification. Because we have classification for construction, or for the construction phase, we have classification maybe for cost calculation, we have classification for cleaning. So there's different kind of approaches with classification, but IFC is kind of answering to all of these questions. So, but anyway, so classification, we need both. That's how I feel. We need both classifications and we need IFC, but they're two different things. They are kind of providing different, well, they're providing same information, but in a different form, let's say. And to be honest, to replace a classification using IFC, I'm not saying that's impossible, but it would be really difficult because it's built in a different way. Yeah. Fire regulations, they are really difficult. There are also other types of regulations which are kind of based on relations, but maybe fire is one of the most difficult. They are, for example, you have a door. The door has a fire rating, but the fire rating for the door is not actually the door property, even though we write it in the door. We have in the door, we have the fire rating, but it's not caused by the door. It's caused by the two spaces where the door is serving those two spaces. And actually, it has also connection to the wall where the door is attached. So that's just the final result, that the door has to have the fire rating, but the reason for that is somewhere else. So when you look at the fire regulations, they are kind of typically talking about that kind of relationships, that when the room is something, or there is a passage between point A or from point A to point B, you need to have certain things, which then leads that the corridor needs to be wide enough, or the doors need to have a fire code. So the fire regulations are, in that sense, they are really difficult. Then the fire regulations also are multi-dimensional. So we have, maybe this is a European thing, but I don't know how it works outside. But in here, in Europe, you have the structural fire resistance. Then you have how many minutes it takes that the wall burns down, how many minutes it takes that it supports the structure above. Then there is a flammability of the surface, and also how much smoke it provides. And so there's many aspects. So it's not just one aspect. And at the moment we have in IFC just one place for the fire code. The second thing, which we are still kind of, let's say, inside the group, a little bit have different opinions, let's say, is that we have three types of fire, or three values for the fire code. We have the regulation, which is written in the legislation. Then we have the as designed. The architect reads the legislation and says that find out that the wall between these two rooms needs to be EI 60 minutes. And then we have the actual outcome, what we call as selected. So the contractor then builds a wall made from concrete, and the actual what we call as selected fire rating is then maybe typically a lot more than what was designed. And we have already agreed that the regulations are regulations. We are not going to store that into IFC model. That's in the legislation. But then I believe that we need both the as designed. So what was the intention that the architect intended for the fire, for the sound, for several different properties, and then what was actually built or what was selected for what was the selected product. Because once you have a renovation, maybe later on, then it's pretty good to know that, okay, it was designed for 60 minutes, but the actual selected product is actually 180 minutes. Yeah, and this is the challenge 4 is kind of connected to this that we need to have this as designed and as selected because some of the regulatory information is found in the product data, and we don't know that when for example in Finland when we are applying for building permits, we don't know the products, especially if it's a public building. In public authorities, they can't design products. They are in public buildings. You are only designing with requirements for products, and then when the contractor selects the product, then we actually know what is the actual outcome. So partially the regulations are the information for the kind of regulatory part is found in the product data, and that is also a challenge. How do we handle that? Especially if there's a need or requirement to provide the information at the end of the project. Yeah, okay, this is something that I probably have already talked about this, that we have this different kind of as regulated, as designed, as selected. And how are we going to handle those in the models? And as regulated is probably, or let's say, at least in this project, we are not going to propose that the regulations are going to be presented in the IFC model. So that's maybe our thoughts and where we are, and so we have good at least 30 minutes for this project. Now, the project is, we could actually go on with this project forever, but we need to end somewhere. So now what we need to do, we need to finalize this project, and most likely this project will need to have a second the second season for this But it's because what we have seen, for example, in the regulatory domain, we were just before these 2 sessions, we were talking about that, like 5 years ago, when we were having a regulatory domain or regulatory room session, there was maybe 5 or 6 people in the room. Now we have 30 people in the room and maybe another 30 online. So it's the interest towards regulatory processes has been it's increasing, which means that there will be also more kind of requirements to the quality of the data and the content of the data. So I'm expecting that we will pretty soon have more needs for more properties. And I think that part of this project has been to kind of generate a process how we can like work in the future. So when we come up with this season 2 for this regulatory information requirements, then we already know that how we are going to do it, and probably we will have a lot faster process. So that's, at least to me, that's one of the outcomes. And of course, it's we have still a lot of things to do. Well, the biggest thing that we have now, what we need to do, is to actually describe, make a description of all things. It's quite easy to say that we need a property called has door closing, but then explain why that is needed. Because first of all, it's when this project and the final report is out, it actually goes to the technical domain, which is then starting to place questions that, okay, why do you need that? Why do you need that? Is this really necessary? So we need to make those kind of descriptions and kind of explain that why this predefined type or why this new property is really needed. And also, when it's finally then published to IFC, of course, in the IFC, we need to explain that this has door closing property means that the door has an automatic closing device that shuts the door automatically. So that kind of work we still need to do, and probably that would be good if you could help on that, commenting and maybe writing also the descriptions. Okay, thoughts, questions, ideas, comments? Yeah, I will give you a...
Yeah, thank you. What's the reason that you decided to create a new property set, which is called PSET window regulatory, instead of suggesting to just add it to the current property set?
There are actually some which are kind of, if they make sense to put, for example, a new property or add a new property into set of PSET door common. We have done that also, but then for those which are just for what we think that are just for regulatory use, then we have placed them in separate property sets. But that's also, I think that that's one of the things that, because it has been a choice that we made, but if you feel that you disagree with this approach, then we are free to take comments on that.
I don't know yet if I agree or not, but do you also created like common regulatory sets that could apply to different entities? Like this door closing is of course specific for doors, but maybe some other properties that could apply to multiple entities.
Nick?
I mean, one of the most obvious is size of things. That throughout the regulations, there are questions about the size of things. And IFC 4 introduced a property set for the major dimensions of anything. And that's great because it means that we don't have to disperse sizes all over the place. So, yeah, we've done that where we can. I mentioned about compliance to external documents or clauses or exceptions and so on. We'll have a single property set to handle all of those. So any compliance claims that you're having to make because it can't be evidenced any other way, that'll be a single property set you can attach where you need it.
But it's that's kind of tricky because of the structure of IFC. For example, let's just an example just out of my head, like fire exit. If the entity can be a fire exit, well, window can be a fire exit, door can be a fire exit, but IFC valve cannot be a fire exit, or well, maybe it can, yeah. So it's kind of that because of the structure of IFC. It's actually quite small number of properties which are valid for in a hierarchy. If you go up in the hierarchy to all entities below that, and yeah, maybe that's IFC 5 which will solve that. But yeah, I kind of understand your comment because it duplicates a lot of stuff. So the fire exit or fire rating, which is already, of course, in IFC 4 or 4.3 already, but the fire rating property needs to be in several P sets. Yeah, it is already, but yeah, but it's kind of the duplicating some things which would be nice to just have one fire rating, which you can kind of then add to any entity, but. Which can apply to yeah. So it's and but it's kind of a bit annoying that we are duplicating things, but at the same time I don't see that as that big issue. It's just something that you can live with, to be honest. More questions, comments? Yep. Yeah.
Thank you for the work. Maybe my question's out of left field. So this is being developed in a context where we're hard coding rule sets, where you're checking. So you're having to hard code specific parameters to check against, or is it open up to any type of rule interpretation mechanisms?
Well, you can use it, but let's say for regulatory use, probably not hard coding in the sense of software development, but in a way, we have tried to use as much as Boolean or logical values as possible, because that's more clear to see that has door closing or has contamination or has something, is fire exit, or so it's more clear. When there is a text value, which is then more kind of free value, then it's more difficult to check. Yeah. And it also gives people are very they come up with lots of things. So, for example, the fire code is one example that even in the Finnish legislation, the fire code EI 60 is written at least 3 different ways: EI space 60, EI 60 together, EI dash 60. And so then you need to check lots of things. So yeah, it's so we have tried to use as much as logical values as possible.
Just to follow up, because I guess in the context where, and I was wondering around the work that the Accord project is doing, they're trying to develop a rules ontology. And how does this work sort of set with that sort of ontological development around rule sets, and how do you interpret rules? Because I think that's sort of the key here. We sort of see a very distinct approach that.
Yeah, we have been trying to test this using IDS. It's kind of let's say that it's a first step to this kind of language, even though it's a bit limited for the purpose, because you can't have really complex, like if you have a room A, which is a classroom, and room B, which is a corridor, there must be a door in the middle, which fire class is EI 60. So in IDS you can't have that. So I think that in a Accord project that is something maybe which is tried to be achieved. I don't know, but that's kind of that goes to code checking then, and those other things. So in this project we are more or less trying to just provide the technical, let's say, capabilities or like a technical starting point, and then the rules can be then developed further from here. Maybe Nick has something to add. Yeah.
Because, I thought you might like to hear my PhD on the subject. I think the regulatory room did a study 6-7 years ago now. Yes. On rule languages and the way of capturing these. Because, I mean, when EPLAN Czech was developed in Singapore, it was a case of writing the rules by hand, and you needed to have a Singapore regulatory expert, you had to have an IFC expert, and you had to have a programmer sitting at the same screen continuously. It took 3 years. And so we wanted to look at whether there were better ways of doing this. Tomorrow I'll be showing that there is a better way, very briefly. But I think we can move from a programming model for regulations to a declarative system. And that will be more efficient. A page of regulation in an hour rather than in a month, and so on. So I think there are things happening around this. The properties in the regulatory support that by saying these are the kinds of questions you might want to ask in a fire regulation, like does it have a door closer or not? Now, the actual regulations from different countries will be all sorts of different ways around. Some regulations will say if it has a door closer, it must have an alarm to warn people it's about to close. Other people will say if it's a fire exit, it must have a door closer so it's shut. So how you use these properties will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But the observation we're making is that there is quite a small set of things already in the IFC, or we're suggesting to be added, which is the common vocabulary. The World Bank, yes, I think it was the World Bank did a review of fire regulations across the world. And they just said there are about 15 things that fire regulations regulate. Now, they're all different, but they're all regulating those same 15 things. So we're not automating regulation. If you want to know how to do that, talk to me afterwards. Sorry, sir. Yes.
One thing that we are now, of course, we are we have been talking a lot about like challenges or problems and things that we are now going to add because they are missing from IFC. But another thing, another kind of approach to the same thing would be that, for example, in Finland, if I take away the properties that we need to add for IFC site and IFC building, then the number of new properties that we actually really need is 5. So basically, with the current version of IFC 4.3, well, 5 properties and maybe 5 or 10 predefined types. But so my point is that with the current version of IFC 4.3, we can do actually a lot. So it's, I think that, and I think it's also quite important message that you don't have to wait for these new regulatory information requirement properties or new version of IFC or whatever. You can do a lot of things already with the current version. Sometimes it's a bit limited, of course. So you can't do all the things that you want, or maybe it's a little bit awkward in some parts, but still it's really working, and you can do a lot with the current version as well. And the thing what we are doing here is just kind of fine tuning a little bit, so that it serves better the needs. A little bit sort of a sidestep. One of the reasons why I think that the regulatory BIM is really important is that it's harmonizing the content of BIM. So when we say that we produce the IFC for the building authority, it's just actually tip of the iceberg, because at the same time, the same information is valid for several other processes. And I think that if we can kind of if the information that we produce serves 2 or more processes at the same time, it will dramatically improve the quality of the information. So that's why kind of at the same time when of course there are these some rules or some properties that we have in the lists, they are only serving the kind of the regulatory processes. But for example, the predefined types, they serve not only the regulatory process. I think that most of them serve also other processes like quantity takeoffs or construction installations in use and so on. So I think that that's a kind of a, yeah, that's one of the, at least my goals or my objectives, to try to always look at how can I make the information specified in a way that it's valid for different stakeholders. Okay, more questions? Yeah, it's you can you have the address there. So if you contact us, then we will provide you the spreadsheets. So we have Excels at the moment, and like I said, we have lots of writing to do. So the descriptions and kind of explanations need to be need to be done. But yeah, you can have it.
So is the plan to make it public that everybody can download?
Yeah, okay, but good question. Where the final goal? The final goal is that we are, of course, the final goal is to have it in the IFC standard. But meanwhile, we are publishing this to BSDD. So then that's kind of the way we are going to document this.
So this then that you want to add missing properties to the
Yes.
But I'm working in Dutch municipalities to create ideas for at least the space objects.
Yep.
As a start. I have to deliver the ideas in the version 1 in June for only the space objects as a first start for municipalities to require only the space objects. And I want to check it with your opinion. How do you describe the properties for spaces in your requirements? So I'm curious.
There could be even some properties for spaces. In spaces, for me, that's now we are in my home ground. Space is the most important entity in the building, of course.
That's why we started there.
I've been wondering why we have only one entity in the IFC to represent all the different spaces, because all the other objects are there just because of the space.
Yes.
And so now in basically what we have in the proposal is that for the main categories of spaces, and with those main categories I mean the room, the cross area, floor area, cross floor area, apartment, those types of categories we are handling with predefined types.
Yeah. What we did, like the gross floor area objects and the apartment objects, we decided with a team of a few real estate developers, some contractors and some municipalities to take the IFC spatial zone for that with a certain predefined type, user defined, and then according to our national standards for how to define those objects. And for all the rooms, we use this IFC space object. Yeah. So we actually we chose a direction based on all information that we could find. So maybe how do you look to that? So we don't actually need more space objects, because we decided the real space, like between the walls, that's only the space, and every object that's bigger, that's making a zone, or that we use spatial zone for that.
I'm sorry to say, but that's a wrong approach. And the reason is that in IFC, we have already, in the IFC space, we have the cross-floor area. So that is there. And the second thing is that the IFC spatial zone, if you read the description, what is it for made? It's made for kind of space reservations or evacuation routes or stuff like that. So of course you can use it whatever you want, but kind of I've been trying to kind of understand the essence of IFC and how it has been, how it's been specified. And well, maybe I could be wrong also. You can challenge me.
I think you're wrong. That's why I'm here to discuss this topic.
Yeah.
Because the gross floor area as a predefined type from IFC space, it doesn't work that well, because, for example, in Revit, if you model a room, then it's automatically touching the borders of the space. And if you make like a gross floor area, you really draw that as a line, and then that's a different kind of object. And
I kind of understand you, and I also agree. I would like to have a new IFC entity, IFC class for this cross floor area to represent those kind of quite essential areas that we are using, for example, in building permitting or whatever. So that would mean that we would change the IFC schema. Maybe we can propose that as well, but so far, because in IFC, the cross-floor area, it's a predefined type of IFC space. So that kind of leads that's kind of leading the direction towards that you should use the IFC space for cross-floor area, for level area, for
yeah,
it's not a perfect solution. I know.
Maybe you forgot to delete it when they.
yeah, that was I was thinking too, because space zone is an addition in the latest IFC version, and the predefined type was already there in 2x3 as GFA closed floor area.
But that would be. Please comment and once you get the number, because I totally agree that we are lacking at least one entity for representing the different types of areas.
We will write something down and
Yes,
send it to
very
you
good.
so you can consider.
So then I can go to Leon and Thomas Liebig and say, give me the rules.
And we have actually a lot of example models already from all those real estate developments that's already having those objects and properties inside the model, and municipalities that are testing it to check them. So maybe you can see that as a use case for.
So maybe you already know that I'm convening the European standard for area and space measurement. So.
Okay, I'm not. I didn't do that. Do you have the chairman of our national standards also involved? Maybe
from the TC 348. He's a Dutch guy. Yes. It's my nightmare, the spaces in IFC, but just kind of because we in this project we chose not to introduce new entities, new classes to IFC, so that's why it's how it is. But if you give us ammunition, if you give us enough tools that we can go to Leon and to the technical committee, that we really need the new entity for like these cross floor and level areas and apartments, and I think that would be something that we would actually need for IFC.
So if you're willing to help us with the review process, please again send us an email and we will make a package of information for you to examine. And yes, we need the comments as we finalize things. Any other questions or comments? Well, again, I'd like to show appreciation to Tomi for setting up this project and leading it and struggling with all these issues. Please don't go home and have nightmares about predefined types. Tomi will take care of it all.
Okay.